Good morning. Actually, from Hawaii. I know we're in our house, but as you are watching this for the first time, we are still on our getaway to Hawaii. So we're recording this ahead of time. Actually, we have a Hurricane Milton supposed to be coming through later on tonight. So we're getting all this recorded while we still have power. But a lot going on here. I know you have a lot going on in your life. So here we are coming to the end of October, which means Thanksgiving's around the corner, Christmas, New Year's. We're going to turn around. It's going to be gone just like that. So what are you hoping to accomplish before we get into that busy holiday season? You still got some time. So kind of giving you a little heads up because you're going to turn around like that. And then, boom, we're into the busy holiday time. So, great time to get that started.
I usually start my Christmas shopping in September, and I have not started any of it yet.
So, you're way behind.
I'm way behind, so I got to get with it.
You've got time, so...
Yeah.
Still got time. We can make it happen.
All right.
Okay.
Stressed me out, so...
I think we're all set here now that you're stressed and on high alert.
I am, and I wonder how many people you just stressed out on YouTube.
Yeah. When do you guys do your Christmas shopping? How early do you start? Some people are literally like, as soon as January rolls around, I'm starting. Other people are like, it's not even December yet, so I got plenty of time.
I start in September usually.
So you're way behind.
I am way behind. This is not good.
Okay. Well, we're behind on our schedule, so let's get rolling.
Let's do it.
Gather round, everybody. It's time for a family meeting. The Family Meeting is a show that's all about family relationships. We're the Osterkamps. I'm Thomas. This is my wife, the very stressed out Lysandra.
Hello and welcome to our family. Welcome to episode 213 of the Family Meeting podcast. On today's episode, we're going to look at what to do if you're fighting a lot. If fighting has become the norm in your marriage, what do you do?
What's fighting a lot to you? What do you look at as fighting a lot?
Once a day. But that's not really, I mean, that in my opinion, that's a lot. But what we're talking about is like when a couple cannot have a normal, peaceful conversation at all. Like fighting is, if you are talking to each other, it's going to end in a fight.
Okay, so
that's
it's
what we're talking about
a
today.
Constant.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because some couples, that's what they're dealing with. And then we come along and try to give them conflict resolution ideas and all this stuff. And they're like, we can't even talk about anything. Like we are way past any of that. So that's what we're going to kind of talk about today. Give you some tips on what you can do to even start the journey toward being able to have a healthy relationship.
Okay. And maybe what you need to do is just get away for a couple days.
Yeah.
And work on your relationship. And we have this opportunity for you that is coming up February 20th to 22nd, 2025. You're like, what are you talking about February already for? Well, we're at the end of October now.
Yeah.
So that means New Year's right around the corner. So make your plans now to join us February 20th to 22nd, 2025. In Pigeon Forge.
Oh, I can't wait.
So we're going to be with our friend Mark Harvey and Barnhart Baptist Church for their marriage retreat that's going to be held at the Hilton Garden Inn in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee. So beautiful area.
Yes.
It's a great place to get away as a couple for a few days. Spend some time working on your relationship. You can do some sightseeing, some shopping, some hiking, whatever you like about that area. It's going to be a great time, and I guarantee that you will walk away from this retreat with some action steps that you can take to make your relationship even better. So go to familymeeting.org, and we'll keep you updated there on how you can register and be a part of that. But mark it on your calendar right now. Go ahead, pull your calendar out. If you have to push pause right now, do it. February 20th to 22nd, 2025 in Pigeon Forge. We're looking forward to seeing you there.
Listen, I love the fact that Thomas and I get to go around the country and speak at these conferences. We meet the most amazing people. We get to be a part of people's lives and their relationships. Sometimes we get to actually see like some of our investment coming through when people make these awesome strides in their relationships, whether
Yes.
it's spouses or parents or whatever. And so I love it. But I have to say, it is extra special when we get to go somewhere like Pigeon Forge. Like I'm very excited to go to this location too. We've been there together before.
Yep.
And I'm sure we haven't actually talked about it, but I'm sure we'll go early and we'll do some hiking of our own and invest in our relationship before we pour into others. So I'm excited about this one in
Me
particular.
too. It'll be fun.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about our topic for today. We are not just talking about fighting and conflict resolution. I mean, we're focusing on how to make progress in your relationship when it feels like you can't even talk without fighting. So when your husband walks in the room and you're like, okay, I've got to go grocery shopping. I need you to pick up our son from soccer practice. And that's all you're trying to do. You're just trying to talk about who needs to do what and be where tonight. And it all of a sudden ends in an explosion because you can't even have a regular discussion anymore. Fighting is the norm. Fighting happens all the time. It happens in front of the kids. It's happening sometimes in front of people that are like friends or just even acquaintances because you just can't talk civilly to one another. That's what we're talking about today. And that's hard. I mean, being in that situation is really hard when every conversation turns into a battle. And you've all heard of that like conflict resolution stuff, but how can you implement it into your life if all you're doing is yelling and fighting? Like you're not going to really make any progress.
Yeah, so what we want to do is discuss what you can do if this describes your relationship. But before we do, let's explore some of the reasons that have led to this dynamic in your relationship. If we're going to be able to work to a point where we can get through all this stuff, bring resolution, actually have a decent conversation about whatever, we've got to understand what the underlying root is. And sometimes it takes a little bit of work. So that was like just yesterday. I just felt really stressed, and I don't exactly know why. Kind of short in my responses to Lysandra and the girls. And I even told her, I'm not trying to be rude to you. Like, I just feel really irritated today. I don't know what's going on. And we have to take some time to get down to the root of the issue. So there's a reason why you're interacting this way. What is the reason? Why are you fighting all the time? Why are you each so angry and explosive all the time? What led to this? And one thing it could be is unresolved conflicts that have been allowed to pile up over months and years.
Yeah.
And here's the thing that you've got to understand, because maybe you're one of those people that are like, I'll just let it go and hope it gets better.
Yeah.
Or hope it'll go away. Like, can I just tell you something? It never gets better that way. It never just goes away.
Right.
In fact, the opposite is almost always true, that it's just going to get worse until you deal with it.
I was this person for a while, like
Totally.
way back at the beginning. My goal was like just to offer forgiveness, like Jesus would. Like, I mean, it really had this beautiful motive, I would say, behind it, but it was a detriment to our marriage. It wasn't good. I had a good motive, but it was terrible. What happened is I kept thinking like, I won't talk to Thomas about these things that are bothering me or these things that have upset me, or when he's hurt me. I'm just going to offer him forgiveness like Jesus would. And you even kind of feel a little like holier than thou when you're doing it. But then those things that like build resentment, and pretty soon, like I was so angry with you inside quietly, like you wouldn't have even maybe known it. But inside I was so angry because even though I had tried to offer divine forgiveness like God would, I am human and I couldn't do it. I was so angry, and we had to work through that.
Well, and then I would be like, where is this coming from? Because you would talk to me a certain way or respond or explode a certain way. And I'm like, what in the world's going on here? Because at this point, nothing, to my knowledge, nothing has happened. And then we have this response. I have this response from you that doesn't match the situation we're currently in.
Right.
And so it's like, what in the world is happening here? And so you do have that buildup. And I just want to say this because you talked about trying to forgive. Listen, you can forgive and you should forgive while also confronting the issue at hand.
Right.
Like those don't have to be mutually exclusive. Like they should go together. But if you just let it go, so to speak, it'll just keep piling up. It typically gets worse. It's not just going to get better on its own. And what happens, and this is true in our relationship, it's been true in our relationship as well, is these lingering issues from the past can resurface,
right,
causing tension. And you may not even in the moment realize why the tension is there, why the irritation is there, why that anger is boiling up all of a sudden. Because as happened with us, like there was nothing really happening, and all of a sudden Lysandra's response would be harsh, angry, severe, passive-aggressive, or whatever else. So if conflicts aren't addressed, they can fester and lead to more frequent fights. And that unresolved conflict just builds up. It's not going to just dissolve. Your previous issues pile on top of one another and build resentment. So to kind of get you to understand this, I'm going to give you an illustration that is a little bit gross.
Oh, man.
But
what are you going to say?
I think it will help you to see how this issue of just letting things go can pile up and cause problems. And
oh, man.
So I have a household of 5 girls. So sometimes what happens is the bathtub or the shower stops draining.
Yes.
And inevitably, I know what the problem is. It's hair.
Yep, that long hair.
It's hair and whatever shampoo, and all you ladies with your 5 million products, whatever it is. Like, here's us men. We have one product that covers literally every inch of our square body.
Yes.
We can clean the car with it. We can carpets and everything else.
Right. Like you would ever clean the carpets, but okay, go ahead.
But you just keep like pulling hair out, and it's more and more and more and more, and it's just kind of piled up. And that smell. Like if you've ever had to clean out that drain, that hair, that is one of the worst smells in the history of mankind. It's one of the worst jobs that it happens in a household.
And the longer it's left, the worse it gets.
Yeah.
Because it like attracts other gunk and filth to it, and it just rots, and it's so foul.
But that's the way this unresolved conflict is as well. Is it just the longer it stays there, it just rots. It like corrupts your heart, and it just gets more and more foul. And you've got to take time to work through all the situations. So then what happens is this resentment keeps us on edge, on the defensive, and every time something little happens, it quickly turns into a fight where it's like normally that's not a big deal. Normally you could let that slide. Maybe your spouse left their dishes in the living room while they were watching TV, went to bed, and they've been sitting there for a day or two.
Oh.
But
a day or two?
But that normally wouldn't cause a fight, right?
2 days? Yeah. I could understand like if I woke up and he had went to sleep before putting his dish in the sink, but like you leave it all day that day?
But that's not going to result in a fight in our house.
No. It'll be more
is,
like
is what I'm saying, right? Yeah, it's like, oh, this is kind of inconsiderate, but maybe he just left it there and has not gone back through the living room and has noticed it. But if you're on edge and you're defensive, you see that when you get up in the morning, and rather than like thinking through and understanding it, maybe it was just an oversight. Somebody was tired and hasn't noticed it. You're now thinking in your mind, they don't care. They're so inconsiderate. They're always doing this. And you jump right to the negative, which creates that hostility and turns it into an argument very quickly.
In a healthy marriage relationship, you would see those dishes left there and you would go up to your spouse and you'd be like, hey, just so you know, you left your dishes out. Did you know that? Oh, man, no, I didn't know that. Let me grab those.
Or you just pick them up and take them to the kitchen without another thought.
Which that definitely happens here. But if it's an unhealthy relationship, all those things that Thomas just mentioned go through your mind, spiral pretty quick. And your response may be to go pick up that dish and throw it against the wall and break it everywhere because you are so furious. So that's the difference. Like when everything has built up, it just leads to this and you become very defensive. And a lot of times I know what happens for me with unresolved conflict is something teeny tiny will happen that's irritating. And I take that thing and then I just start like swirling it in my mind. And I'm like, yeah, and the other day he did this and the other day this. And and pretty soon, like my mind can get to the point where I'm like, I hate him. I mean, this hasn't happened for years, but at the beginning of our marriage, I absolutely went there where I said in my mind, I hate Thomas.
Well, and I think a lot of that had to do with what we're talking about is not working through the issues. And so everything is stacking up.
Yep. One pastor said this when we were speaking at their retreat, and I thought it was so good. And I told him I'm going to steal it all the time. What was his name? Oh, no. I just lost his name. Anyway, in Mississippi. Howell. James Howell?
Yep, James Howell, yeah.
James Howell. Shout out, James. He said, if you keep sweeping things under the rug, pretty soon you're going to trip over the rug. I thought that was so good. It's really true. It doesn't just go away. As you're talking about like, why are we like this? What got us here? What led us to this explosive dynamic in our home? It may be as simple as communication issues and one or both of you are just not talking. Misunderstandings and ineffective communication lead to arguments. So if you have constant misunderstandings and constant ineffective communication, you'll have constant arguments, right? And pretty soon now we're fighting all the time. So for instance, maybe you have one spouse that is a shutdown. They shut down, right? So like all you want to do is just talk to them about this simple thing and they refuse. They just zone out. They won't answer you. They will not speak about it. We have come across couples like this where one spouse is like this. And they have a great reason in their mind. They have maybe even a noble motivation. And that is, I don't want to fight.
Yeah.
I want to make sure we don't fight.
Trying to keep the peace.
I'm keeping the peace, so I'm not going to say anything. But what that does to the other spouse is leaves them so frustrated and extremely angry. And then they are going to actually attack that spouse because they just want a response. They want something to happen. Say something. I'll do anything to get you to speak, even if it's attacking you. And then when they attack, of course, you respond to that, and then it's a fight. So because somebody won't communicate, it leads to arguments. Or maybe it's not a shutdown spouse. Maybe it is just somebody who doesn't communicate clearly or changes the rules of communication constantly.
Yeah.
This is so frustrating and it will absolutely lead to a lot of fighting. So if you are basically like, how did you not know that I expected you to pick up our son from soccer? How did you not know that I wanted you to do that? You didn't tell me. But I said this, or I mentioned this, or I talked about being at work. Just because you talked about being at work doesn't tell me I need to pick up our son from soccer. You know, you've got to think about how are you communicating? Where does my fault lie in the communication? So if you have misunderstandings and ineffective communication constantly, you have constant arguments. And maybe that is the simple thing that is just leading to this constant fighting in your marriage.
Well, and I was just listening to this book yesterday by Lencioni about working through the 5 dysfunctions on a team. And one of the things he was talking about is, okay, and he's talking about in the business world, so you've got your executive team or your staff or whatever, and you're having a meeting about X, Y, or Z. You might sit there for 2 hours and think you're communicating well, and then you leave the meeting and everybody has their own idea about what happened. And so one of the things that he talked about was at the end of that meeting kind of writing out, okay, what have we decided in this meeting? And literally writing it on a whiteboard so people can look at it. And then as they're seeing that, they're able to say, well, that's not what I thought. And they're able to ask questions and whatever else. But then everybody knows on the same page, this is what we've decided. And sometimes we have we think we're communicating well. Mm-hmm. and we're really not. And so we talk about having that feedback just to make sure you understand clearly what I'm trying to say, what I'm trying to get across. We come to an understanding, okay, I have to work late today, and so I'm going to need you to go pick up our daughter from soccer practice at 3 p.m. And getting that feedback to make sure we're on the same page. I know Lysandra has to do this with me all the time just to make sure I've got it. Like, you've got the information. Maybe it's a difference in values, opinions, priorities, and perspectives that's causing all these different issues. These could be differences in finances, and that is one of the number one things that causes conflict in a marriage is not being on the same page with finances. We're getting ready in November at our church to do a series on finances. So if you're struggling in that area, keep an eye on my social media, and you'll be able to kind of walk through that series with us. But that's a huge issue for a lot of couples. Maybe it's parenting. You don't always see eye to eye in how you should parent, discipline, and all those sorts of things. Maybe it's faith. You've got a certain religious upbringing, and your spouse has a different one. And okay, what are we going to do as a family? How are we going to raise the kids in faith? And politics can be one. And we're in that political season, right? Election is literally right around the corner, and so much conflict, so much divide. Now, if that's in your home, that can be difficult to deal with.
Yeah. It can be a powder keg.
Maybe it's just simple lifestyle choices. All these things can create friction if not discussed openly, and it leads to a relationship where fighting is the norm. You've got to learn to discuss these things, come to an understanding, and figure out a way where you can work through these things together.
Now, you most likely didn't get married and immediately begin to fight all the time, right? It started with a few fights here and there, and unresolved, resentment and stuff has built up.
Now, you do have those couples that even when they were dating, they were fighting all the time, and it's like, why are you guys even getting married? Because you're fighting nonstop. And if that is you, maybe you are dating right now, and you're fighting all the time. What I would encourage you to do is to get some counseling and learn how to work through these situations before you walk down the aisle, because it doesn't get any easier.
No.
Like, getting married is not going to make the situation just magically this fairy tale where we get along and we agree on everything. No. It only compounds it, because now you've got a lot more added stress and pressure.
Exactly.
But for most of them, it's not starting out, like you say, fighting.
Exactly. Like, if you're fighting all the time, it's probably not because, like, you got married and boom, it was already like this. But it built up, and the unresolved resentment came and it kept building up and added on. And then stress and external pressures come into play from different areas in your life. And pretty soon, it is really, really volatile in your relationship. So think about the external pressure and the external stress that is in your life. If you and your spouse both are experiencing extreme external stress, this is going to come into play in your marriage. This may be one of the reasons that you guys are fighting all the time. This may be the thing that has created the recipe for explosions.
Well, and just thinking about yesterday and how I was feeling after taking some time to think about it, this is what I believe is the underlying issue that I was having yesterday. Is I was feeling a lot of stress from just all the different things we have going on in our life, between work and helping people through their personal problems, major personal problems, hurricane coming in, we're supposed to be getting ready to go to Hawaii, and then there's all the added pressure of work, of making sure everything is done for while I'm gone. Because I can't just walk away and leave things for other people. Like, there's certain things that I have to do. And so I think it was just one thing stacked on another, stacked on another, stacked on another.
And it had nothing to do with me. None of those things were from me.
Right. And that's not an excuse for behavior, right? It's never an excuse for bad behavior, but at least it helps me to understand, okay, where is this actually coming from?
Right. And life stressors can be work. It can be family responsibilities, previous trust broken. It can be from affairs. It can be financial concerns. All of these different things that maybe are bringing stress in, and it all affects the marriage. It amplifies the tension, and pretty soon it can lead to this fighting all the time.
Maybe it's repeated behavior. And you say, well, what do you mean by repeated behavior? I'm talking about repeating a behavior that you have kind of witnessed maybe growing up. Like, this is how your parents communicated, by yelling, by insulting, by fighting, and that's just how they communicated with each other all the time. So for you, that is the norm. Mm-hmm. For you, that is how you communicate. That is how you disagree. That is how you deal with everything.
And if you have two spouses who both grew up in volatile environments where yelling and everything was just how communication happened, that house is going to be rough.
Yeah.
Because now you've both had that modeled, and so you believe it's normal.
And here's the thing. Even though you witnessed that, that doesn't mean it is the right way to communicate and the right way to handle issues, because it's absolutely not. Mm-hmm. But here's the thing. Past experiences can influence how individuals respond to certain situations, causing disproportionate reactions to relatively minor issues. So you have to cognizantly understand, this is the way that it was in my home growing up. It's not the way it should be. I've got to change. And you also have to think about the example you're setting for your children, because the example you're setting for them makes it easy for them to follow in that same kind of pattern. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So if your pattern is constantly yelling, insulting, fighting, that is the default that they're going to lean to.
Yep.
And unless they, on their own, understand that's not the way it should be and they choose to make a change. But we as parents, we've got to think about the default that we're setting for our kids.
Right.
And we want to set a default that says, you know what, no matter the circumstances, no matter what's going on in life, no matter what's happened, we can sit down, have a reasonable, peaceful conversation about this and work through this together.
Absolutely. Another thing that can be part of what led to this fighting all the time is neglecting the relationship. If you and your spouse are prioritizing other aspects of life over your relationship, feelings of neglect can lead to this frustration, and it can start up arguments all the time. So maybe the husband is feeling frustrated because the wife does not offer herself sexually enough, and he feels like he's neglected because she isn't interested in sex. She feels like she is neglected because he doesn't give her time and attention, and they're both frustrated, feeling neglected, feeling unloved, uncared for. And they're both angry all the time and pent up frustration. And so then this is going to lead to this fighting all the time, where it just leads to an argument, leads to a frustration.
Maybe it's poor coping mechanisms. You know, you've got bad habits, you're relying on unhealthy coping strategies like sarcasm, withdrawal, silent treatment, stonewalling. You know, we could add a lot more things on top of this, but if you've got these poor coping mechanisms, you know, that can exacerbate conflicts and cause even more problems. So it's good for us to be able to explore whether or not we have those.
Yeah, and I think all these things are good for you to go ahead and evaluate and see, like, what is it that led us here? Or maybe you listen to all those things and you're like, check. We do all of those things, or that's the reason. All of those things apply. Okay, so now you've kind of dug down deep. You've figured out why we are like this. So what can you do? What can you do if this is the dynamic in your relationship? If we were to tell you, you just need to sit down and have a conversation with your spouse. Well, you're like, no, you don't get it. We can't do that. It makes me think of in Genesis in the Bible, where it talks about Joseph's brothers and how they could not say a kind word to him.
Yeah.
Like that's where your relationship level has gotten to. So how can you implement any of the healthy conflict resolution techniques that you've heard about or you've read about, or maybe you listened to on a podcast like this one. So here's the first suggestion that we're going to make to you. This is the first thing that you're going to try, and you're going to very quietly and calmly go to your spouse and suggest this, or maybe the best thing for you is to send a text or an email or whatever. You're going to say, listen, I care about you. I love you. I don't like that we fight all the time. I want to suggest a peace treaty evening. A peace treaty evening.
Okay, what is a peace treaty evening? How do you define that?
You are going to both agree that you are going to have one evening where you have a peace treaty, where nobody can bring up hot topics, hot button issues. Nobody can yell. It's just going to be an evening where if we can't say anything nice, we aren't going to talk, but we're going to be together. Okay. So maybe that's a date night. Maybe you're going to go out to dinner.
You're more likely to be on your best behavior out somewhere in public, right? So that's a good idea.
But maybe you can't even, you're like, an evening without fighting, it's not going to happen. Okay, 1 hour.
Yeah.
Go for 1 hour.
You're going to go to dinner.
Yep, just go to dinner and get home. And then go ahead and blow up and fight again. But you're just going to figure out how long can we make this peace treaty last, because what we're going to try to do is be together without fighting for a very small time, even if it means not talking at all. If when you talk about the kids, it produces a fight, you're not going to be allowed to talk about the kids during this hour or this date night.
Okay, so you have certain things that it's just off limits. We're not talking about kids or finances
Maybe it's
or
no
politics.
Work. Yeah, you can't talk about work. We're not going to talk about church. We're not, whatever your hot button issues are, and maybe for you it's like basically everything. You are not going to talk about them on this date, even if it means you have to sit in silence and just eat. Because what we're trying to get you to do is be together without fighting and feel what it feels like to be together without fighting, even if that means nobody talks.
Yeah.
And then after you do that maybe once or twice and you start being able to be in the same room without fighting, you're going to add in some things to your peace treaty evenings. You're going to add in some of these other things that we're going to get to. Okay. But that's the first step, is being together without fighting, learning how to be together without fighting. One thing that you can also try to do is eventually you can try to have a peace treaty where you're going to have sex. So you're going to put aside everything. Like, I'm mad at you. I hate you. You hate me right now. But we need this release.
Yeah.
And so we're just going to do this thing. And it's not about love at this point. We're just going to be together tonight. And maybe that's part of your peace treaty. Okay.
Kind of like that episode of Friends where Monica and Chandler are fighting.
Oh, yeah. But they set it to the side.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And you can do that. Now, there's other things that you're going to bring into your peace treaty evenings. But at the start, it's going to be very simple. Just try to get through one evening or 1 hour without fighting.
So how often in the beginning would you recommend having one of these peace treaty evenings?
I would say once a week.
Okay. I think that's a good place to start, once a week.
Mm-hmm. And then once you get there, then you can add in some of these other ideas we have for you.
So next thing we want you to do is to set ground rules. All right? So what are the rules of engagement going to be? Mm-hmm. You have to have some rules that you're going to agree on for discussions. For instance, like no name calling.
Yeah.
So that's going to be one of your ground rules. Avoiding absolute terms like always or never. Because those are, first of all, they're not true. And then because they're not true, even if they're mostly true, because they're not true, it puts a person on a defensive right away. Right. They're not open to hear you. They're just looking to prove that that's not true. So you never take out the garbage, and that's part of your argument. Well, that's not true.
Right.
Because, hey, once or twice a year, I get it done. So even if it's mostly true, you're going to agree to that. Something like taking breaks if things get heated. All right, I finally, we're talking and I get to a point where I'm like, okay, I can feel myself getting angry. I can feel myself getting upset. Like that, literally feel temperature rising. I'm starting to get flushed. All right, I need to take a break. Okay, we agreed that if one of us was getting too heated, we're going to take a break. And we do talk about this in our book, Happily Never After.
Yeah, we actually have 2 chapters devoted to fighting fair in our book, Happily Never After, and you can find that on Amazon. So that is something you could read together on your peace treaty evening. It's chapters 5 and 6.
Go to familymeeting.org/shop, and you'll see Happily Never After there. You can get your copy today and work through those chapters 5 and 6.
Yeah, and you can also go to the beginning of our podcast, way back, episode number 2, and you will find conflict resolution, fighting fair.
That was 211 episodes ago.
Yep, but it's there. You can find that, and that can help you maybe setting some of these ground rules.
Well, and I always say this as we encourage people to go back to the beginning. Don't hold those early episodes against us.
I wonder if we sound young.
I don't think it's that, but we've learned and grown a lot about podcasting and doing this over the last 4 or 5 years. But there is very helpful information in the book and also in that episode that can kind of help you set some ground rules. And what I encourage you to do is to literally write them out. Like, go old school, get a piece of paper, literally write them down, what all the ground rules are going to be.
That's a good idea. Okay, next thing that you can do to kind of start helping with this process of not fighting constantly is start to identify some patterns. Pay attention to the reoccurring themes in your arguments. So often, it's not even a new argument. You're just having the same argument over and over and over, and that's why you're fighting all the time. So understanding like what triggers conflict. Is it talking about the kids? Is it the finances? Is it when we talk about sex? Is it work and time spent together? Like what's our triggers? What's starting the pattern? Do we fight every day when one of you comes home from work and takes their shoes off in the house and gets mud on the floor? Like, does that always cause a fight? Okay, let's talk about that. And while you're identifying your patterns, which can help you understand your fighting, focus on some solutions, right? So, okay, how can I help my spouse to not take their shoes off right there? Maybe I could meet them at the door and be like, hey, let me take your shoes. Okay, whatever you've got to do, find some sort of a solution that can get ahead of the trigger, ahead of the pattern. And then instead of rehashing that problem constantly, so, you've figured out like, this is the argument we have over and over again. Rather than keep doing that, try to shift the focus on finding a solution, maybe together. Now, if you're fighting constantly, you may not be to this point where you can even like brainstorm ways to address this issue and collaborate on like problem solving. You may be a long, long ways from that. But as you keep doing your peace treaty evenings, as you keep working on fighting a little bit more fair each time, you may get to the point where you can start to shift your focus to solutions.
And then you agree to pause and reflect. You feel an argument brewing, take a moment to just pause. All right? Reflect on what's really bothering you and whether it's worth escalating into a fight. Because as we talk about in the book, there are things to fight about, but there are times where it's like, okay, this is not worth fighting about. This is not the right time to fight and all those sorts of things. So as I feel myself getting upset, like, okay, it feels like we're getting hostile toward each other. Let's just stop for a second and let's pause and let's just really think about this.
If you need to count to 10, count to 10. All right. This one I think is kind of a cool idea. And that is schedule fight time. Okay. So you've scheduled peace treaties. You got to schedule some fights. You have to plan for it. It's fight night.
Yeah. Well, and I'm a big fan of the UFC, and I just want you to think about this for those of you that are not. Okay. When they have these fight events, like it's not just a random pop-up fight somewhere. Like they literally they pick a location all around the world. They have these events that take place. They pick a location, they pick a time. Everybody knows when the fight is. Like nobody's caught off guard. They don't just all of a sudden pull the champion from somewhere and say, here you go, it's time to fight. No, they have it scheduled. And the same is true for you because you're going to be able to work through things best when you select the right time to get through the situation.
Yeah. So schedule a fight night. Maybe that means taking the kids to grandma and grandpa's. Maybe it means waiting till they go to bed and trying not to fight in front of them. But schedule this fight night, all right? And this is your specific time to discuss the issues, the fights, the things that have made you angry from the day. Maybe you need to have one night a week that is a peace treaty night and 5 nights a week that are fight nights, because that's where you're at. Go ahead and do it that way. That's fine if that's what's going to take to get you through some of this stuff. But as you get ready for fight night and you get ready for like, okay, we're going to talk about the stuff that makes me angry, both of you are going to prepare mentally and emotionally. Both of you are going to be ready for this fight. And this isn't about like, I'm getting my arguments ready. I'm getting like, ammo in the gun. That's not what this is. It's more about being emotionally ready to have a discussion and not catching each other off guard. And yeah, maybe it is going to escalate to yelling and stuff because you're not ready to change those habits that you have so deeply ingrained in you. But it's going to get you a time where you can discuss the things that make you angry. And it may actually help you to deal with times during the day where you can't talk about them, but you know that you have a fight night coming, so you can deal with it then.
Well, and I just want to add this about the fight night. And I'm going to go back to the mixed martial arts competitions. When these two fighters get into the cage, like they're not alone in there. So there is always a referee there. And maybe where you are, if you're in such a position where all you're doing is fighting all the time, in order to healthily work through some things, you may have to have a referee in there.
Yeah, get a mediator.
And so, getting together with a counselor, and maybe that is your fight night. Like, okay, we're agreeing, and this may be part of your ground rules, we're agreeing not to talk about any of this stuff unless we're in with a counselor. Because we literally cannot keep from insulting each other. We cannot keep from yelling and shouting and taking it to a level we shouldn't. So instead, what we're going to do is we're going to schedule these fight nights with a counselor, and they're going to be able to help work us through these problems that we're having, get this resolution in a way that is going to be positive and not do more damage. So let me just say that. For some of you, this is exactly what you need. You need to find a good counselor, whether it's your pastor or a good Christian counselor in your area. If you need help finding one, you can always reach out to us at info@familymeeting.org, and we can help you find a counselor in your area. We're also available for marriage coaching as well if you need somebody to help you kind of be that referee as you schedule your fight nights.
And as you lead up to your fight nights, it's okay to go ahead and have a running list of the things that you want to discuss. I want to discuss about how you gave me a really big sigh when I said I didn't want to go to that place for dinner. I want to discuss why you spanked our kid when I didn't think it was that big of a deal, or whatever it is. Go ahead and write those things down so that they don't become unresolved issues, but you do plan to talk about them.
And then one thing you have to learn to do, and this is a learned skill.
Yes.
This doesn't just happen. And it doesn't just happen because we are self-focused and we're naturally just selfish, self-centered people. And that is active listening. Typically, we listen in order to respond.
Yep.
And so I might catch the few first words of what Lysandra's saying, and then I'm jumping to how I'm going to respond to that. Well, you can't do that. If you're going to work towards resolution, if you're going to be able to get past this stage of constantly just fighting about everything, you've got to learn how to do active listening. And it's a practice skill. When one spouse says something, the other must repeat the thing they said. So if Lysandra's telling me some things that she's upset about, things that happened, maybe I did, how I responded, things I didn't do, whatever it is, I'm going to let her talk, and then I'm going to respond in a way like, okay, let me make sure I heard you right.
So what you're saying is,
you're upset that once again I forgot to take out the garbage and we missed it again, and so now we're going to have all this garbage piling up for another 4 or 5 days. Am I hearing you right? Yes. Okay. Or maybe I'm trying to repeat it and I didn't get it right. So that gives Lysandra a chance to say, no, that's not what I was saying. That's not what I meant. Okay. And gives her a chance to maybe clarify in a different way. And then once she's done that, I'm going to repeat it back to her until what I say matches what she meant. And that may take a while.
Yeah. You have to wait.
You may have to go back and forth 4, 5, 6, 10 times before you're actually on the same page and you understand each other. So you've got to have that affirmation then, okay? I get to a point where I've understood what you're trying to say, and then once we've gotten to that point, okay, now it's my turn. See, we think we have to rush into a response. We don't. So you need to get to a point where you can repeat back what they've said, show you fully understand it. Okay, now instead of just them jumping back on, now it's my turn. Okay? So let me, and for some of us, we have to think about it a little bit. Okay, so based upon what I'm understanding about what you're saying, give me a minute, let me formulate my response, and then we're going to repeat the process. Now I'm going to say my response, you're going to repeat back to me what you think I've said until you understand what I'm trying to say. And you just keep going back and forth like this as long as it takes. This does not have to be over in a minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes. If it takes an hour, it's worth the hour if you get to a point where you understand each other.
And if you don't have an hour, then say like, okay, we're going to have to talk about this later and put it on the schedule for a fight night. Because if you don't have an hour, don't try to have a quickie fight. Because most likely you're going to say things you don't, you didn't mean to say. They're going to hear things the wrong way. So you can't do active listening real quick. Usually it takes a while.
Which is why you schedule the fight night.
Yep.
But what this does is this reduces defensiveness and opens up a more productive dialogue where we're not just responding to what we think each other are saying. We truly understand each other. Now, you may still take some work to come to resolution, but at least I understand what you're saying. You understand what I'm saying, even if we don't agree with each other.
Yeah.
The point is to understand, not to necessarily agree at this point.
That's right. Okay, so as you move through this process and now you're able, you've had your peace treaty evenings, you've had your fight nights, you've gotten a little bit through the process. One thing that you're going to now implement into your peace treaty evenings is some check-ins. Okay, let's go ahead and discuss our feelings. How do you feel? Do you feel like things are better? How do you feel about our relationship? Where do we need to work on? What can we do to improve our relationship? Talk about some fun things that you can do together. So you're going to have kind of an emotional check-in to see how each other is doing. And you can't do that at the beginning. Like it's not something that you can do at the beginning.
Yeah, and here's what we want to encourage you to do as you're continuing to work through this. Right, this is all progressive. It's probably not all going to happen at one time, but you're working through these things. We encourage each spouse to write down 5 things you like about each other. So if you're fighting all the time, one thing it's easy to do is to pinpoint on all the negatives, and you're hyper-focusing on all the negatives, and you can forget why you fell in love in the first place, what you really love about this person, what positive things they are doing in life and in your relationship. And so what we want to help you do is to retrain your focus, to stop focusing so much on the negative. And most of it may be negative, but let's stop focusing in on the negative. Let's turn and try to focus in on the positive. So that helps you remember the reasons for being together, celebrating each other's strengths, which can shift the focus from conflict to connection. And post it somewhere where you're going to see it every day often, whether that's on your mirror, on your visor in your car. You're going to the refrigerator multiple times a day, probably, if you're like Lysandra and I. So just put it somewhere where you're going to see it all the time, and it's going to remind you what you do love about them. because you need those reminders.
That's right. That can really help you. One thing too that you're going to want to do is really try not to address just the symptoms of your fights and the things that are causing these arguments, but look for the roots, right? So for instance, like we didn't really have a full fight, but Thomas was irritated the other day, and he was reacting to things in irritation, and he was irritable about whatever. So that was just a symptom of the other stress he was feeling, right? And so we got to the bottom of that. So find the root causes as you're going through all this stuff. And this can help you to actually fix some of the situations and the issues rather than just go around and around on them. And it is okay to take timeouts. But do remember that if you take too many timeouts, you may forget about what's going on, and you have to schedule times to talk about those things. So don't schedule a timeout and then never get back to the issue, because then that goes back to the stuff piling up. So make sure that you are scheduling your peace treaty evenings and scheduling your fight nights, and that's going to help more so compartmentalize the fighting, so it's not all the time.
So I know those of you who are listening, you're at different places. You've got different things going on. So your family meetings tonight are going to look a little bit different depending upon where you are.
Okay.
Now, if you are in this stage where it's everything is a fight, all right, the thing we want you to do is just sit down and with your spouse and schedule your first peace treaty night where, hey, we're just going to go out to dinner. And what I encourage you to do is to pick your spouse's favorite restaurant, whatever that is. Whether you like it or not, just pick their favorite restaurant and say, hey, I'd like to schedule, we've been fighting constantly. I want to schedule a peace treaty night, and I just want to go out to your favorite restaurant for dinner, and we're not gonna fight. We're not going to bring up anything that's sensitive. We're just going to spend time together, not fighting, and remember what that feels like. And you coming as kind of a first sign of peace, right? You're extending that olive branch by, I want to go to your favorite restaurant and just remember what it's like to be together without fighting, even if that means we just sit and have dinner and we just talk about the meal and that's it. Or we don't say anything. Because even what we're having for dinner can cause fights because of X, Y, or Z.
Yep.
But that's the step some of you need to take. That's the family meeting some of you need to take. For some of you need to move beyond that, and it's time to start setting the ground rules. Like, okay, we got to set the ground rules. We're not going to name call. We're going to, do these certain things that we've already discussed and established that. Some of you do need to set up some fight nights, whether it's alone or whether it's with a counselor or somebody else. You've got to have that referee there, but we're going to schedule what is the right time for you, what's the right time for me, where we're alone, the kids are away or they're asleep or whatever else, and we can just begin to work through some of these issues. And you say, well, maybe we're past that in our marriage relationship. Well, I want you to take that step of focusing in on positivity. So whoever you are, whatever stage you are, you can take this step in your family meeting, and that is list out 5 positive things or qualities about your spouse. And I would encourage you to take time to share those 5 things with them. Mm-hmm. And that's the family meeting you have to have tonight, is just share the 5 positive things. These are the 5 things that I love about you, I see that are great qualities that I'm thankful for. And then as we mentioned, post that list somewhere where you're going to see it often and be reminded of the good things that you love about your spouse.
Thanks for joining us today. Please go and subscribe to the Family Meeting Podcast from your favorite podcast provider. And if you found this information helpful, please share this episode on social media and invite your friends and family to listen in with you.
To find more content and information Lysandra and I provide, you can go to our website, familymeeting.org, or email us at info@familymeeting.org. If you'd like to shoot us a text or call us, you can send a voice message at 904-257-3062.
And we want to invite you to join us for our next family meeting as we talk about the love chapter from the Bible in context of loving your children. So we want to talk about understanding a godly love for your kids, and this is going to greatly impact your parenting.
So for those of you that maybe aren't as familiar with the Bible and what the love chapter is, that's in 1 Corinthians chapter number 13. And even if you're not a follower of Jesus or Christianity isn't your thing, it's a great definition of what true love looks like. And I would encourage you just to Google that and see what it has to say. That'll kind of help you as we get ready to talk about this on our next episode together. Thanks for joining us today for this family meeting. Have a great week, everybody. This meeting is adjourned.
All right.
So what about you? Where are you at in your relationship? What is it that you need to focus in on? Are you at that point where it's like, man, we're just fighting all the time and we've got to schedule that peace treaty? Or maybe it's, you know what, I have been kind of a little irritated. We get along pretty well most of the time, but for whatever reason, everything they say or do seems to annoy me right now. It's time to dig down to the root of what that is. Or maybe it's just those 5 positive qualities. And here's what I would encourage you to do right now is in the comments, just put down the 5 things that you love most about your spouse. What are the 5 qualities or the things that they do, or personality, or whatever they do for you? Maybe it's they do remember to take out the garbage every single week, and I love that. But put that in the comments there. We're often quick to criticize in public and not necessarily quick to praise. And so what a great thing for your spouse to be able to look on YouTube and see you publicly praising them for the things that you love about them. So let's do that this week. Let's spread some of that positivity and encourage others to do the exact same thing. So I'm looking forward to reading those comments and celebrating with you on those positivities. Let's focus on that this week, and we'll see you next time.